Hi folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is season 16, episode 7. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we are. Great to have you with me once again. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, for many of us, retirement is more of a process than an event, okay? Rather than a hard stop where one day we're working and one day we're not, many of us will reduce our hours, maybe move to less stressful, lower paid jobs for a few years before we finish altogether. Phasing retirement is now easier than ever thanks to flexible pensions, and today I want to run through the practicalities and the implications of retiring gradually. So after the main body of the show, as usual, I'll look at the most recent review that's been left, announce what we're going to be talking about next week. But before any of that, remember, this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my friends at 7 Investment Management. They've been helping me out here for ages, since the spring of 2011, and I'm so grateful to them. Could not have built this to what it is without their help. Fun fact, it just crossed 3.5 million total downloads for the Meaningful Money podcast, so thank you as well. Definitely check out what 7IM are up to. They're at the 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Go check them out. Okay, now phased retirement, capital P, capital R. All right, I nearly said capital F then. Nope. Capital P, capital R is a technical term relating to pensions, and we'll get to that as we go through this session. But I'll probably use that phrase just to talk about the general process rather than the event of retiring. In fact, let's just get into it, and then I can tell you what we really mean, okay? Remember the notes and the links from today's show. They're at the show notes, which is the only link you need to remember. So if you're out and about and you can't write it down, just remember this: meaningfulmoney.tv/HS7. That's for Home Straight, the name of this season, episode 7. meaningfulmoney.tv/HS7. Let's have a look at what you need to know first. Okay, first thing to know is that phasing comes in many forms. All right, so let's cover off the kind of the life practicalities of phasing into retirement first. So maybe you'll reduce your hours, or you'll take a lower paid, less stressful job, right? What might that mean for you? Well, the obvious implication, of course, is that your income will reduce. So we're going to need to be prepared for that. How will you make up the difference? Do you have pension schemes or other secured incomes that will kick in to fill the gap? Do you have capital reserves that you can draw from? Phasing into retirement might not actually mean you change your job, but instead you might stop paid work altogether and opt for volunteer work instead. And obviously that'll pay you nothing, right? The clue's in the name. So the impact then will be greater than taking lower paid work. Now, if you're in a relationship, then the phasing might happen between you, perhaps with one partner stopping work first and then the other a year or two later. And that will obviously have an impact on your income as well. So there's quite a lot of ways to phase the practicalities of stopping work, but ultimately the impact is on your income. Now, whichever way you choose to do it, second thing you need to know is that phasing into retirement allows a period of adjustment. That's both financial, in that you can stagger your reduction in income over time, and it's physical, in that you can still maintain some level of routine and work, even if that work isn't paid. I don't know about you, but I'm a big believer in structure to the day and to the week, and phasing allows you to maintain that to some degree, or at least adjust your routine gradually rather than abruptly. Retirement represents a massive change, actually. I've called it in the past the Great Transition. And sudden, radical change isn't always a good thing, even if it is planned for and expected. Physical changes from, full-time employed to waking up the Monday after you've retired with no work to go to, is potentially dangerous, actually. And while that's a strong word, I imagine we've all seen people who have worked like dogs all the way up to retirement and then drop dead shortly after. What a terrible thing that must be. So while I'm sure there's obviously lots of factors involved when that does happen, I do wonder if the sudden change of tempo isn't actually a pretty big part of that. So adjusting over time then might make more sense if it's practical to do so. I'm aware that many of us might not have that option, but financially speaking, reducing your earned income over time gives you a chance to adjust your spending if you need to. Or if you're topping up your spending account by drawing from capital, gives you a chance to settle in and to see how that pans out practically. And then it can ease you into the so-called decumulation phase. There's a bit of an argument on Twitter about whether that's an actual word or not, but it is in the dictionary, so I guess it must be. So we're going to cover how you should position a portfolio for long-term investing next week, okay? But for now, the third thing you need to know is really about how phased retirement works with a capital P and a capital R, how it all works with pensions. So I think probably we're all fairly comfortable with the idea that it might make sense for some people to ease into retirement, as we've talked about, for both physical and financial reasons. But what does it look like from a pension management point of view? Now, as I said earlier, phased retirement is a technical term specific to the process of shifting money into drawdown over time. So let's go over this carefully. Most folks listening will be comfortable with the idea of drawdown. Drawdown came about as a reaction to the once-for-all nature of what was then the only alternative, which was called annuity purchase. Now, with an annuity, you handed over your accumulated pension fund that you'd spent maybe 40 years building up. You handed it over to a life insurance company in a once-for-all, irreversible transaction. And in return, that life insurance company gave you an income for life, a guaranteed income for life. Now, when you put it like that, that sounds all right, doesn't it? But the big question, of course, is the exact nature of that little phrase at the end, for life, because none of us knows how long we're going to live. So, necessity ever being the mother of invention, drawdown was invented in 1995 to provide an alternative to annuity purchase. And essentially what it means is that it allows you to keep your pension fund invested. And if you think of it as a bucket with your money on it, you can stick a tap on that bucket so you can draw off money from your pension fund as you need it. Now, it used to be that the amount you were allowed to draw from a drawdown plan was capped, using something called the Government Actuaries Department, or the GAD rate. That's all history now, since our beloved former Chancellor George Osborne removed all that and ushered in the age of flexible pensions in 2015. Now, phased drawdown was the process of shifting only part of your pension fund into drawdown, leaving the rest, quotes, uncrystallized. All right? So here's an example. Let's say you've got, for the purposes of this, no earned income at all, right? You've finished work, you're doing some volunteering perhaps. You have zero income whatsoever, no rent from buy-to-lets, no state pension, nothing. Well, if that's true, then you have a personal allowance for income tax which is being unused, right? So let's face it, you got to eat, so you're going to need some money from somewhere. So you decide to phase some of your pension fund. It actually doesn't matter how big your pension fund. So what you decide to do is you phase £16,666 of it, even though the personal allowance is, as I record this, £12,500. So why would you take more than that? Well, remember that 1/4 of anything you take from a pension plan can be taken as tax-free cash. So in that example, 1/4 is £4,166, and the balance, which is taxable, is £12,500. So you get £16,666 out of your pension without paying any tax by using both your tax-free cash allowance and your personal income tax. The, quotes, taxable bit falls fully inside your personal income, your personal allowance. So that's marvelous, right? Now, it used to be much more complex than that when the amount that you could draw down was capped, but it isn't anymore, so it's much easier than it used to be, which is great. Now, in this example, anything that you didn't take out of your pension, right, stays uncrystallized. It's still pre-retirement, if you like, with all the benefits of that. It's outside your estate for inheritance tax. It's very easily and tax efficiently passed to your beneficiaries and all that good stuff. Now, it's worth mentioning a similar but subtly different arrangement called UFPlus, right? Only the financial services industry could come up with an acronym like that. It stands for Uncrystallized Pension Fund Lump Sum. Now, in the first example I just gave you, and in true drawdown, you have essentially two accounts. One crystallized, your drawdown pot, and one uncrystallized. And the process is simply that you decide how much of your pot you want to crystallize. That money moves across to the drawdown account, and then it gets paid out to you, either all in one go or over time. What Off Plus does is it misses out the middle step, right? It just takes, it's basically lump sums only. That's what the LS in Off Plus means. It misses out that middle step, and so you don't need a drawdown account. It basically just vests it, crystallizes it direct from your pension. And that can be useful if perhaps your pension plan maybe charges annual fees for running a drawdown account. With Off Plus, as I say, the money comes straight out the uncrystallized pot and into your bank. But other than that, it's treated, certainly for tax, exactly the same way. Okay, so, we understand a little bit about the practicalities of how phasing might work, both, in a life sense, reducing phasing income sense, and also the mechanics of how pension phasing might work. But what should you do, right? What should you do with this information if you're thinking about how you can phase into retirement? Let's have a look at what you need to do. Okay, obviously you should start by making a plan. So remember we said a couple of weeks ago that plans are automatically wrong the second they're faced with real life, right? Now, that's true, but the power of planning is in helping you think through what you might need to do now, in advance. Now, earlier in the season, we talked about building a timeline of year-on-year income so that you know what's coming in and when. Then you can quantify in each year, and from there, you can quantify that rather, the gaps in each year. And then you can work out where the money to fill the gap should come from. So the thought process is actually quite simple, step by step. Firstly, how much do I want to spend in, let's say, 2025, the first year of my retirement? That's step one. Knowing that, step two, how much secured income do I have from company pensions, rental income, state pension, part-time work? Okay. Now, step three, assuming that that is likely to be short, less than the amount that I want to spend, what's the difference? What's the difference between my required spending and the income that I know is going to come in? That difference is going to come from capital. And if that's the case, step four, then specifically where should it come from? Which account? Which asset class? Things like that. Now, we're going to get to that in a lot more detail in the next 2 weeks, specifically in 2 weeks' time, in episode 9, which is called Optimizing Your Retirement. But for now, you want to have some idea of the amounts that you're going to need to draw down in each year. Okay, so what do I want to spend? Step one. How much income do I know I'm going to have? Step two. Three, what's the gap? And then four, where do I take that money from to fill the gap? That's our thought process as we're working out how to draw down from our pensions and from our other pots in retirement. That's how to phase. Second thing we need to do is to check the flexibility of our existing pension plans. So chances are you've got quite a few pension plans amassed over various jobs or maybe personal plans that you've dabbled with. Then maybe you've moved on to the next thing. Back in episode 4 of this season, we talked about positioning the pieces. And you definitely need, as part of this whole process, to check the ability of your existing pension plans to provide the kind of flexible benefits that we need. So specifically, you should check charges around so-called flexi access drawdown and also see whether Off Plus is an option. Now, if you've got plans that aren't flexible enough to facilitate the kind of withdrawal pattern that we might need, you are going to need to think about maybe moving those pension pots. Again, we talked about that in episode 4, so check that out or listen again if you haven't already. I'll make sure there's a link in the notes. Third thing we need to do is to work out how much, if any, cash lump sum you might need or want. All right. Part of this decision about accessing your pots will be influenced by any lump sum needs or wants that you have at retirement. The vast majority of my clients have something that they want to buy at retirement. Makes perfect sense, right? It's a kind of reward for making it to the end of your working life. That might be a camper van or a boat or just a big holiday maybe. So maybe think about your own lump sum cash needs and the timing of them, as well as the regular income that you're going to need. Really important. Fourth thing you need to consider doing at least is maxing your ISAs to bridge any gap. You see, if you're on the home straight towards retirement, I think it's worth making sure you've got plenty saved in ISAs as well as pensions. Now, it's hard to balance the two. There isn't a correct balance really between the two main savings vehicles. But ideally, you want to make sure that you've got enough non-pension money set aside. And the thinking behind that is that if you retire early, very early, you might not be able to draw your pension straight away anyway. Remember, the earliest you can draw from pensions is 55, and that is rising to state pension age minus 10 years from 2028 onwards, right? So after that, it's going to be a minimum of 57. Now, in episode 9, in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be working out how best to bridge this gap, if it exists for you, right? If you're retiring after age 55, this is not really an issue. But for now, I think I would just be aware that having everything in pensions might not be ideal. Ideally, you want some flexibility over where you draw your money from. So having pensions and ISAs, as well as cash in the bank, will probably serve you very well. Now, finally, just a quick word about something called the money purchase annual allowance. So we talked earlier about drawdown and off plus and such like. Most of you will know that there is a maximum you can pay into a pension each year. It's called the annual allowance, and that's £40,000 or 100% of your earned income. That's the numbers anyway at the minute as I record this in early 2020. So £40,000 or 100% of your earned income, whichever is lower. Crucial point, which I think I forgot to say just then. Now, there's wrinkles to that, particularly if you're a higher earner, but that is basically how it works. But that changes if you take any taxable income out of a DC pension plan, defined contribution. And that's true even if, as in our earlier example, the income you take isn't actually taxable because it falls into your personal allowance. Think of it as potentially taxable, right? As soon as you take even £1 of taxable income out of a DC pension, you are now subject to something called the money purchase annual allowance, and that's just £4,000. So you won't ever be able to put more than that into a pension in any given year. Now, many of you will be thinking, well, so what, right? Why would I want to put money into a pension when I'm retired? But you might be surprised, actually. Tax relief is a powerful motivator for adding into your pension plans. If you've got decent DB scheme income, plus maybe in your early retirement you've got some earnings from part-time work, you might actually want to put any extra income that you don't need, put it away for when you decide to give work up altogether. And tax relief can be a powerful factor there. So just be aware, there can be implications to some of these decisions that you might not be aware of, okay? More on that in the next couple of weeks. But I think I'll leave it there for now. What are we? Only 17 minutes in or so. But I'm going to continue building on this theme over the next couple of weeks. So do stay tuned, okay? Right, review from Vicky W, who says, brilliant. I listen to Pete's podcast every day on my way to work, and I'm slowly getting through all the episodes. Surprising how many people say that, actually. I'm at the early stages of my investment journey, and Pete, you have helped so much with answering so many of my questions. Thank you. You make learning about all things finance easy to understand and fun. Well, I'm glad. Thank you so much, Vicky W. Really appreciate it. Thank you for leaving me a review. Folks, if you like what you're hearing and you want to leave me a review, meaningfulmoney.tv/iTunes if you're of an Apple podcast persuasion. But pretty much wherever you're listening to me, if there is an option to leave a review, please do. It really, really does help. Helps others to hear about the show and subscribe, because by leaving a review, it hacks the rankings a little bit and I end up showing quite high. So now, obviously I'm writing and recording this a little bit before it comes out, but markets are fun, aren't they? Sheesh, talk about interesting times. Now, if you're a long-time listener to the show, you know that I will always counsel inaction in times like this. You can't possibly hope to get any timing right when the markets are swinging around by 10% per day, right? So why even try? As painful as it might be, particularly if you're invested in a 100% equity portfolio, which I know many of you are, as painful as it might be to watch the balance dropping, right? However you're invested, you'll see your balance go down. Always remember these 4 truths, okay? Number 1, investing should always be for the long term. Number 2, market declines are temporary, but markets always advance over the long term. They always go up eventually. Number 3, spreading your money around over different asset classes and different geographies is an excellent way to reduce the volatility of your investment as a whole. That's why I talk a lot about multi-asset investing. That's what it means. And then finally, crucially, even though the value of your portfolio might be down temporarily, you only lose money when you sell out of your investments and move into cash. Crucial point. You haven't lost a bean until you sell out and go into cash. Don't forget, the Meaningful Money Facebook group is a brilliant place for mutual support, okay? meaningfulmoney.tv/community is the place to go for that. Also, I'm sending out a weekly digest called the Meaningful Digest. It's an email newsletter now. It comes out every Friday. That gives me the chance to be fairly current in commenting on what's going on. You'll hear a lot more of the same. Hold your nerve. Don't make any snap decisions. But just head over to the Meaningful Money site and you should see a sign-up bar at the top of the homepage. Put your name and your email address in there and I'll make sure you get the very next Meaningful Digest on a Friday. Don't forget that Meaningful Academy is open. If particularly you're thinking about how to invest in retirement or how to build wealth, those phases of the Academy are not open yet, but they will be quite soon. And if you want to register your interest, then go to meaningfulacademy.com and you'll see towards the top the option to either register your interest in the build wealth phase or in the retirement planning phase. So if you haven't done that already, meaningfulacademy.com should be fairly straightforward as to what you need to do to sign up. And then you'll be notified then and get the deepest discount when it does get launched. Okay, folks, hope that's a useful session for you. We're going to be talking about investing for longevity next week. All you investing nerds, you're going to love it, or at least I hope you will. All right, and that's it, folks, for this week, for this session of the podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Questions and comments, you know what to do. meaningfulmoney.tv/HS7. Hope you enjoyed it, folks. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next week. Cheers.